Welcome to the Old Fashion Masonic Podcast, where we talk all things Freemasonry while drinking a cocktail. I'm Brian.
And I'm Russ.
We're going to do something a little bit different. Russ, we're going to talk about, we've spoke about this in the past, about how the Nazis they had an all-out war against everyone, and how it included their essentially attack and them trying to eradicate Freemasons in Europe.
Right.
So we're going to kind of jump through this. You are all things World War II. That is that's you. So you're the real history guys. Again, anything Germans, World Wars, I defer back to you. You recently, in the last, I don't know if it's been 12 months, you went to Normandy.
Not quite yet.
Yeah, Memorial Day.
Yeah.
So tell us about that and how it might pertain just to what you saw on Memorial Day with Masonically.
The trip, my daughter Bailey and I went to Europe. I wanted both my kids to see Normandy. Spencer wasn't able to make it. And I'm a big history buff, like you said, and so I wanted both my kids to walk on the beaches of Normandy and just to, until you actually walk out on those beaches and to walk around those cemeteries, you just, I don't know that you really just get the full extent of it. So what was interesting was back in 2004, I'd actually spent time walking around on Omaha Beach, and when you go to the water's edge and turn around and see Colville Cliffs, you just imagine the carnage and what happened there. And so Bailey and I toured a lot of it. We spent Memorial Day. Actually, they celebrated Sunday morning. At the U.S. Cemetery, and that was quite an emotional experience. Later that day, we actually spent some time in the German cemetery. And as you know, part of the units that fought in Normandy were SS. And I think we'll get into some of the SS here later, but, they were the Waffen-SS. They were the elite, true Nazi troops that fought for Hitler. And so throughout Normandy, those were some of the first times that U.S. troops actually ran across atrocities, and we, walking through that cemetery, you saw graves of just German troops, and I believe they were just like my dad that served in World War II and the war dead that was at the U.S. cemetery. But mixed in between those were SS officers and troops that definitely were not, and they were the fanatical troops. And it was almost sad that...
but they were still given a proper burial.
They were, and there were a couple guys in that cemetery that I know the history on that were fanatical, and they had truly caused some atrocities with French civilians, and they killed women and children and liquidated an entire town just getting to Normandy to fight. And he's buried right there with everybody else. And I wanted Bailey to see that and that those men are buried there too.
So how long was that trip? Was it a 10 day
about
trip?
10 days. We spent some time in London and Paris.
All right. I thought so.
Yeah.
So I'm not a history guy. That is just not me. Maybe more recent stuff, but
yeah.
So this research was enlightening. There's a lot of stuff going on, so we're just going to run through. So if you were as ignorant as I am when it comes to the World Wars, and this was good. So in January of 1934, the Nazis rejected Freemasonry in part because basically the Masons allowed the Jews to join. That was one of their first steps, and
they truly believed that the Jews really controlled Freemasonry as well.
And you know what? Maybe at the time they did. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. So beginning in 1933, the Nazi Germany enacted several restrictions, both legal and political, against anyone who really they thought was in opposition of their ideals. This was not just Jews, but this were Jews. They were Catholics, Jehovah's Witness, the handicap, and today we'd call it the LGBTQ plus community, but anybody who's homosexual, and then even Freemasons were targeted. So anyone, which is so fascinating about Hitler, who he wanted and who he thought was the perfect human, it was the exact opposite. Just fascinating about how he got people to buy into his nonsense. So in 1933, the Enabling Act dissolved all Masonic lodges in the Third Reich. It started there. Mm-hmm. And then in Germany, they confiscated all of the property and banned them from joining the Nazi Party. And then even went so far, the ones that they thought were solid, like, hey, would you, if it ever came back around, will you denounce it? You'll never go back in. About a year later, the Ministry of Defense, they ruled that any current Nazi couldn't be affiliated. So they were just started to kind of work their way down. And they didn't know that until they started getting into the archives and going through the names. They really, really dug deep. So now fast forward to 1940 into France. The Nazis stormed Paris, led by the SS and the Gestapo. They went to police stations, courthouses, and even Masonic lodges. They were convinced that they were going to gather information on the Freemasons so they could maybe infiltrate and join and attack them from within.
Right.
They even raided the Grand Lodge of France, all of the other basically leaders of the appendant bodies. They got all records and all archives. Did you know all that so far?
I haven't researched as much of this as you have, but yes, most of that I knew.
Okay. Doesn't shock me. So Alfred Rosenberg, he was... Google him. Alfred, traditional spelling, Rosenberg, just as it sounds, wanted to prove that Masons were using Satanism and occult tactics. That was going to be his spin of why you should hate Masons. He also had this oddball theory that Masons had the secret to turn lead into gold, which as Masons we know that that's true. So you go back, so now say into France. There were 49,000 active Freemasons at the time, and the Gestapo, the SS, had all the lists and started to publish the names. And then all the Masons that they identified that worked in the public sector in occupied France, mm-hmm. they were done. No more in the public sector. They seized their personal property. Just I don't know if they got their homes, and I don't know what they mean by personal property. That would lead me to believe homes, but I'm thinking taxation, maybe a different thing.
No, I believe it was everything.
Everything. So here's some propaganda that they started. There's a film, and look across the bottom of your screen, you'll see it. It's a French film that they created. It's an anti-Masonic film titled Forces Occultes. Forces, then Occultes. They even created anti-Masonic displays for the public so they could come through.
Okay.
Just fascinating. Just basically, they wanted to expose the secrets, and they probably took some oddball stuff. The research showed back then there were a few other appendant bodies where there were some Masonic bodies that they believed that they could. There were some occult type practices in some of the readings. So thank goodness that those are out. But so now the Nazis move into Belgium. And the Netherlands. They created an anti-Masonic cleansing league, which I'm not quite sure what that was, but it doesn't sound good. It sounds very gas chambery to me. So, would you agree?
Yes.
So, but the more they read through the archives, they pushed harder. Even when they got into Belgium and the Netherlands, they even pushed harder to eliminate the Freemasons.
In Belgium, especially, there were the Nazi Party was there well before World War II ever started and before Germany ever invaded, mm-hmm. and they were probably almost more stern National Socialists and anti pretty much everything than even some German Nazis. They were hardcore Nazis.
The Belgium.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before Germany even invaded.
Interesting.
Yeah, their Nazi party, if you will, and I can't remember what it was called. Those are pretty hardcore guys.
Interesting. Didn't know that. So across the bottom of your screen, you'll see this, but Liberty Cherie, which translates into Cherished Lodge, allegedly, and I'll have the link in the comment section as well, it was founded in 1943 by Belgian resistance fighters and other political prisoners at Esterwegen concentration camp in Hut 6, but they formed a Masonic lodge. So this link that I'll post here, it has the names of the guys that formed the Masonic lodge.
That's neat. I didn't know that.
That's cool. And it's the internet, folks, so you hope everything you read's true, but it seemed legit. The way it was put together, that this didn't seem like a lot of fluff in there, but that just showed, even when the guys were in camps, the Masons are like, you know what, you can take a lot of stuff from us, but this is important to us.
Yeah, Masonry is here and here.
We all know, right? We all know where it starts. So the kind of focus of this, we kind of gave you some history. We wanted to kind of focus on one topic. In 1934, the Grand Lodge of the Sun, now this was a pre-war German Grand Lodge, they began wearing blue forget-me-nots instead of the square and compasses, because they were occupied at the time before the war, to secretly mark themselves as Masons. There were even, allegedly, brothers in concentration camp wearing these flowers. I don't buy that. We'll talk about that later, because that's just my opinion. Now, fast forward to 47, when the Grand Lodge of the Sun reopened, a pin in the shape of a forget-me-not was adopted as an emblem of the first convention of those that survived the Nazi era. I buy that all day because I've seen those. Had you had any idea about that?
I had always heard just the forget-me-not, but that's from the U.S. and sort of the urban legend here. And so, doing some of that research, I'd find it hard to believe once the SS had gotten into
that you're wearing anything on the lapel that they didn't know exactly what it was. Yeah. I subscribe to that. So let's go into some debunkments. So Worshipful Brother Gary Smith, he's a German Masonic historian, okay? And I'll have his name across the bottom as well. You want to look at some of his work. He's done massive research on Freemasonry and the Holocaust specifically. He's got a YouTube video published by the United Grand Lodge of England titled UGLE Webinar Number 5, Freemasonry and the Holocaust. And we'll have that across the bottom for you to easily see it. He went on, he believes that it's a bit of a legend that they had the forget-me-nots during the occupied time. His theory, and which I think, listening to him, I subscribe to, the Nazis weren't letting you wear anything that they just didn't dictate that you could. He went on to say in 1933, the Nazis used a forget-me-not pin badge as a fundraiser under the pretense of the Winter Hellsberg charity, which actually was a rouge for their rearmament efforts. Okay. So I think something got lost in translation, but I subscribe to that more because that's the only way that the Nazis were going to allow you to wear something outside of the bolts, in my opinion. He said his research enforces the fact that the Nazis wouldn't let you wear any other pin or flowers unless it was SS related. So, I mean, he was pretty convincing, and he really cited a lot of sources.
I could see Masons sort of underground sort of identifying themselves by that. But I just don't quite get wearing it openly because it was,
They were scared to death of what this little bastard was doing over there.
And his thugs, the Gestapo, they
were just looking for a reason to flex on people. Yeah. So
always.
Yeah. And maybe early on some folks tried it and got smoked for it, but I think that probably ended pretty quickly. Yeah. That's just me. So, going back to Worshipful Brother Gary Smith, he doesn't dispute what the Grand Lodge of the Sun did afterwards and adopted it. Mm-hmm. But he just thinks that all of this was kind of romanticized. So that's really kind of what we wanted to talk about on the Forget-Me-Not. So I think our opinion is we believe that it was adopted afterwards, but we don't believe that Masons were using that.
Openly.
Fair?
I don't think so.
Anything else before we wrap it up about Nazis and the Freemasonry, Freemasons that you've kind of run across? You've done a lot of reading about stuff.
I just know that, if you tour Dachau and the different camps, sites and museums and things, Freemasons were persecuted and died in concentration camps. And so just go and research. And if you are ever in Europe, go to these sites. It's important that as human beings on this earth that you go see this, because it was a time in global history that we shouldn't repeat, and unfortunately we keep repeating it, and it's sad.
Yeah, in some strong way, in some little ways here.
Yeah.
Well, when you went to Normandy with Bailey, I thought, that sounds fun. I'm not a big sightseer, but after doing a little more research, I'm like, so maybe not. Well, and actually the thing that got my interest peaked about wanting to go was this photo that you took.
Yeah.
You took this photo. You won't ever be able to see it in his home. He took a photo with his iPhone, and he's got it printed on this canvas and wrapped, but it's from a bunker looking at what beach?
Utah Beach.
Utah Beach. From the bunker, you can see chips of bullet holes. It is the most fascinating photo. And knowing that you took, there's some other great photos.
It was a photo that I just took, knowing that it wasn't that. I just knew it wouldn't come out on an iPhone.
Yeah.
And it just came out perfectly. And then I went, no, if I mount that on canvas and blow that up, it's just not going to turn out. And it turned out.
But if you would have put it any other place than where you have it, I don't think it would have had the same effect.
No.
Because it's just right at that angle. You're like, oh my gosh, am I looking outside of a bunker at a beach waiting for somebody to come?
And what's fascinating is those bunkers, when you would visualize, you would just assume those guns are pointing out at the beach. It was pointing, you couldn't see it from the sea. It was going parallel to the beach.
Well, any good bunker doesn't have a barrel exposed.
Yeah,
so
but when you think about that, that's just what you envision unless you've actually understood it or been in the military. You just assume no, there wasn't. So anyway.
Well, I think that's all we have. Thanks,
awesome.
Thanks for following us, and check out
if you've got any comments, let us know.
Hit us up. Thanks.